Brandi with Biggest Backyard Pepper. Today I'm going to make some salsa. I've got tomatoes, cilantro, and every kind of pepper you could even think of. Onions, and of course, the gloves for cutting the peppers. I'm going to get started with all of these tomatoes, and I'll go back to you as soon as we have a little more progress. So here's our progress. I've got all 8 pounds of those tomatoes cut up. I've added some onion into it. If you come over here, we're still cutting up an onion. Hopefully the last one. Then we've got all these peppers that are from our garden. Habaneros, Thai sweet, Hungarian wax, jalapenos, banana peppers. Go on and go on. And then there's some cilantro, some garlic. And we've got to add lime juice, lemon juice, and then some spices. And then we'll show you how it looks. Hey, salsa's all finished. Come have a look. All those peppers and onions and tomatoes and cilantro, everything's in there. Shall I test it? Looks good. Let's see how it tastes. I'm wimpy, so we'll probably get a laugh. Ready? Ready? There's a lot of peppers in there. Woo! That's probably the best salsa I've ever had, but that's pretty friggin' spicy. Holy cow. Got a cup of milk ready to go. Wow! And guys, it only cost 1 finger. I promise it's not in there. Thanks, guys.
And then part 2 for this video will be
not me eating more.
Nope, it'll be me canning up the salsa and getting it into the pantry shelf. As we watch a little bit more, she's, tortured by the heat of the salsa. But she did put some habaneros in it, so
I'll put it all in it. Everything, it's all in it. Let me know if you want some. Bye.
Hey everyone. So we're going to be doing the water bath canning now for the salsa. So right now we've got our jars sterilizing. Easy way to do it is just put them into the water and bring it to a rolling boil, as well as our lids. That way everything is nice and sterilized. And for water bath canning, you're going to need your funnel. You're going to need your bubble removal tool, or your canning tool here. As with the pressure canning, you use this, you stick it in the jar to get all the air bubbles out. And then this here is the gauge for the headspace, or the distance between the food and the top of the jar. For this, we're only going to be doing a 1/2 inch headspace, so we'll be setting it to right there. So like, if you're putting it in the jar, you're only going like that. And then our little measuring cup. We're going to be adding a little bit of vinegar and citric acid to raise the acidity level just a little bit, so we can water bath can these. Now, water bath canning is a very simple way to do it. You don't need like the pressure canner and stuff like that. However, you can only do it with acidic foods. Salsas, tomato sauce. Well, with salsas you need to add acidity, vinegar, citric acid, that type of thing. But if you're making like a tomato sauce, you don't need to use a pressure canner. If you're making anything that's pickled, you're using a lot of vinegar, and for the vinegar you want to use anything that is at least 5%. We get this one here, and it's 6% acidity, so it's plenty. So once the jars are done sterilizing, we'll be back. We're going to fill them and set them into hot water so that way it brings the temperature up, because we don't want the jars to crack when they go back into the boiling water. So once we're done with this, we'll be back and we'll get the jars packed and I'll explain everything step by step. Okay, so we got our jars sterilized. I've got them in the hot water to keep them hot in the sink. Of course, before I did this, cleaned the sink with some bleach wipes and then rinsed it out, filled it up with hot water so that way the jars stay nice and hot. And what I'm going to do is, as I fill each jar, I'm going to put it back in there so it keeps it nice and hot, because our salsa, we like to have it super fresh, so we're put some in jars already that we're going to just keep in the fridge. We're not going to process those, but the rest we're going to process and can up. So it was stored in the refrigerator overnight, and we let it sit out, kind of get a little bit closer to room temperature, but it's still kind of cold. So I'm going to fill each jar, put it back in the hot water, so that way then it can warm up and isn't a shock once it goes into the water bath canner. So we're going to get our first jar. You always want to use your jar lifters. Never try grabbing these with your hands. You will burn yourself. I'm just going to dump the hot water back into the sink. Let's go ahead and move the tripod this way. Okay, so we've got our jar. And there's our funnel. Now we only want a 1/2 inch of head space. So we want to fill the jar up to this level. You can see it's right there. That's how far we fill the jar up. So that'll be a good guide as we fill each jar. Now, before we fill each jar, we need to add one teaspoon of citric acid, and a tablespoon, actually, let's, just to be on the safe side, let's do 2 tablespoons of vinegar. Now this is the salsa that Brandi made a couple days ago in the first part of this video. It's had plenty of time to let the flavors mature and blend together. So we just carefully fill each jar. Oh, can you get the packer?
Okay.
Sending my son to go get a little tool so we can kind of push the salsa down without really making too much of a mess. So hold on just one sec, he'll be back at that. So it looks like we're going to be right about pretty close. Using the small end so it fits down the funnel. Okay, we still got a little ways to go to get to our 1/2 inch headspace. So just do a little more. Kind of pack it down. And we are right at 1/2 inch of headspace. Now, our lids were also in boiling water, so they're going to be nice and hot. Don't reach your hand in there to grab them. If you get a very basic canning kit, it also comes with a lid magnet. And you can use this, just reach right into the water and pick up your lid. You want to use a clean cloth. Just set the lid down and you're just going to kind of pat it dry. Take our, actually, I almost missed a step. That's why I was saying, take it slow, be careful what you're doing. We're going to take another clean rag. I'm just going to dip a little corner of it into our vinegar here. And you want to wipe off the rim of the jar. You want to make sure that there's nothing, no foods, no liquids from the salsa or anything, or whatever you're putting in your jar. You don't want anything on there. Then take the other side and just kind of dry it off. Make sure you don't stick your towel down into the food. Okay. So now we're going to take our lid, we're going to get it seated on. We're going to grab a ring and we're going to put it on just finger tight. You don't want to over crank it, it will not seal properly. So just a light finger tight. Now I'm going to set it back into the hot water to bring it up to temperature. Okay, same thing again. I'm going to dump out the excess water. Put in 1 teaspoon of citric acid, 2 tablespoons of the 6% vinegar, and then we're going to fill the next jar. So now while we're doing this, I've got the canner on a medium heat to keep the water warm. I don't want it at a full rolling boil, so we're not going to turn the heat all the way up yet. That way then it doesn't shock the jars as we're putting them into the canner. So what we're going to do, I'm going to get the rest of these jars filled, and then once we're done with that, we'll move on to the next step, loading the canner and going through the whole process there. Okay, so these have now sat in the water to kind of warm them up so they can go into the water bath canning. Now for anybody who's wanting to learn about canning, this right here is a good book to get. This was not sent to me, I bought this myself. It's the Ball Blue Book Guide to Preserving. So it gives you all the instructions and guides you need. You can also go to the FDA website. There's a link to National Centers for Food Preservation. It has a lot of good information as well. Our recipe is a bit different from what's in here for the salsa, but I use this to be able to, when we go to can, I did the math and figured out how much vinegar and citric acid to put into the salsa when we go to can it, so that way what we can and put on our pantry shelves will be preserved, and we can keep our fresh in the fridge, you know, without having to have it be exposed to the heat of the water bath canner. So, this is still warm, not at a rolling boil yet. We don't want it that hot yet, because we don't want to shock the jars. We're going to take our jar lifter, and we're just going to put them right into the canner. Now, for water bath canning, you do need to have the rack on the bottom to keep the jars from touching the pan directly. We just pulled our canning rack out of our pressure canner, put it in here, so that way then it keeps the jars off the bottom, and that will keep the jars from cracking during the canning process. If your jars are directly touching the bottom, they will probably explode. So you want to make sure you prevent that from happening. Now, one thing you want to make sure of, once your canner is fully loaded, you need to have the jars fully submerged. And there needs to be at least 1 inch of water over the top of the jars. Some people double stack their jars. I've never done that. I'd rather just do 2, especially with water bath canning, I'd rather just do 2 batches. Which is what we're going to have to do, because we still have this whole thing of salsa right here that we're going to need to get canned up. Alrighty. Now, your little tool here, you can also use this to check how much water you have over the top. So when I dip this in the water level is going to need to come at least to this mark right here. If it's over, that's fine. It can't be under. It has to be at least 1 inch. And right there is 1 inch from here to here. So we need to make sure we've got at least 1 inch of water over the top, which we do. We've probably got about 1.25 inches. So we're good. Now, it's always best to make sure you've got a pot that you have a lid for. Doesn't need to be like a pressure canner lid that locks on or anything like that. You just need a stock pot with a lid and your rack in the bottom. So I've got the lid on. I'm going to turn it up to high. And as soon as this gets to a rolling boil, where it's bubbling and it's really going, that's when you start your time. Right here in Las Vegas, we are at, well, where we live in Las Vegas, we're at about 2,800 feet above sea level. The center of the valley is about 2,650 feet, and we're kind of up towards the mountain, and we're up higher in elevation. So we're about 28 to 2850 for elevation. So we want to, and according to the guide in the Ball Book of Canning, or preservation, I believe it's in the back here. Well, let's just go to the index and find out. Okay. So, in here it has a chart for the boiling water or water bath method. So what it lists the altitude, and it says how much to increase your processing time. When you are under 1,000 feet in elevation for water bath canning salsa, it says to do it for 15 minutes. Since we are very close, not quite at 3,000 feet, we need to increase the processing time by at least 5 minutes. So that means we have to take it to 20 minutes for our processing time. Actually, let me check in here. In the tomato section, there is a thing for salsa. Actually, it says to boil them for 20 minutes, so we're going to up that to 25 minutes. Always check your instructions, make sure you're doing it right. You don't want to underprocess your jars. So we're going to, once this gets to a full rolling boil, we're going to start the timer for 25 minutes. Once the timer goes off, we turn off the heat, let it cool down, and then we'll put the jars on our cooling mat. Now for cooling mats, all I use, at the grocery store, you just get a dish drying mat. I use one for cooling and one for filling. That way then, you get one, it's going to get a little dirty, you're going to get stuff on it. Not a big deal, just throw it in the washing machine. But after it cools down, we're going to put our jars here, let them cool. You'll hear the little ping as they seal, and that's what you're listening for. So once this is done and processed and cooled down, we'll be back and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so the timer just went off. We let this sit for about 5 minutes, so that way then it has a chance to kind of settle down. When you lift your lid, be very careful. There is still going to be some steam. You were just boiling water. So always lift the lid away from you. Let it drip into the pan. And then we'll set that off to the side. And this is why you have your jar lifter. You do not want to reach your hand into that boiling water. So now, we lift each jar out. And let's see. I got time right there, so we're good. The water is nice and clear, so that's what I like to see. Means none of the food boiled out or squeezed out from under the lid. You always want to check your water. Make sure it's nice and clear. And just like with the pressure canning, I put vinegar in the water to keep any hard water deposits from forming on the jars. And you want to space them out when you put them on your cooling rack. That way, they got some airflow. You don't want them like right huddled up to each other. Space them out a little bit, let them cool off. You want to leave them like that, undisturbed, for at least 12 hours. Just let them sit. And if there's a little bit of water on top, you can just get a couple paper towels and just gently kind of soak it up like this. You don't want to put any kind of pressure on it. You don't want to push down on the lid or anything like that. It could create a false seal. So that's it. This is our first batch of 7. We've got 6 more that are going to be going into the canner, so that'll give us 13 pint jars of salsa. Well, technically 14 because we've got one in the fridge. Connor, if you could grab that. Yeah, this one we wanted to keep nice and fresh because we're going to be eating this in the next day or two. So I didn't put any of the citric acid or the vinegar in this one because this one is going to be used now. And then, but the rest, I did the citric acid and vinegar because these are going to be in our food storage for throughout the year. So if you like our videos, everyone, please subscribe to our channel, like our videos, leave us a comment. If someone's already commented, reply to their comment. That really helps with the algorithm with YouTube to get our channel out there. We're going to show some more, we're going to do some more shorts. We've got a video for our turnips that we grew from planting. It's going to go from planting all the way through to harvest, which harvest will be here soon. And once that's done, I'll edit that video. We've been working on that one since we planted the turnips a couple months back. So, subscribe to our channel, like, comment, share it with your friends, help our channel grow, and we'll see you next time. That's going to be it for Vegas Backyard Prepper.